Hello, my name is Megs Reynolds, and I am the Executive Director of the Doomer Agriculture Foundation. We are the national voice and champion for mental health in Canadian agriculture. This video is part of our Talk It Out series, and this month we are focusing on anxiety. Joining me today is Rebecca Rackow, and she is with the CMHA. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Mix. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. Can you let us know where you're located and a little bit about CMHA?
All right. I'm located in Regina, Saskatchewan. Um, I'm from the Canadian Mental Health Association Saskatchewan Division, so we deal with issues that go on around the entire province of Saskatchewan. And so the Canadian Mental Health Association, from our Saskatchewan perspective, we have a national office headed up in Toronto, but then we have our Saskatchewan Division office, and we have 10 branches around the province. The branches do more specific work directly with folks with lived experience and members through vocational programs, food programs, groups, and all sorts of things like that. And on a provincial level, we do more provincial programs. So we have OSI CAN and the Justice Community Support Program, the Gambling Awareness Program. Out of here, we have the Hope Learning Center, which is an online recovery college. And we have our Advocacy Center from here for provincial advocacy. That's what we do.
That's amazing. Thanks. So today, talking about anxiety, I guess we'll just jump in and first question is, what do you do if you think that you are, or you feel like you might be suffering from anxiety, or you feel like those anxious feelings that might just be a day-to-day are increasing and they're starting to affect how you go about your day-to-day?
All right. So the first thing you do if you feel like it's not going away and I'm just feeling like this all the time, the first thing you do is see your doctor. Anxiety is a treatable condition, so that you can actually have medications that really help with reducing that feeling of anxiety and reducing the likelihood of anxiety attacks or panic attacks and that sort of thing. And there's a whole bunch of medications that you can go on that can help. So if one thing doesn't do that, your doctor can take care of it and prescribe something else. Anxiety can be a very dangerous thing, right? Really, after PTSD, anxiety and depression, those two things, or in combination, because they're best friends, is the second most leading mental health cause of suicide. So it's the kind of thing that you don't want to leave and let sit and it'll just go away. But just go see your doctor. Now, you don't need to go to a specialist or anything for those medications. Doctors, at least in Saskatchewan, I know doctors can prescribe stuff for anxiety and for depression both.
That's really good to know because oftentimes, especially in rural areas, it is going to be that your doctor, your local doctor, that's that kind of first point of contact. I think we've really normalized, especially in agriculture, living with like chronic stress, anxiety, sometimes depression. What advice do you have for figuring out where that line is between it just being more of that everyday anxiety? Because I want to make sure that there's that understanding that we can have anxiety without being diagnosed as having a anxiety disorder, right? I've had the odd panic attack because of what was going on in my life. They were isolated events. I felt anxious before. But again, I want to make sure that people don't just jump to being thinking they need to be diagnosed or thinking that that's where they're at. So what do people look for? Like, where do you feel that line is where it's not just kind of something that might come up in that day to day from external sources and something that, okay, this is now to the point where I do need professional help and support with it?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head right there with external sources. So if you can go through the things that are running through your head and the thoughts that you seem to be chasing and seem to be snowballing, and ask yourself, is it reasonable? Am I experiencing a reasonable amount of worry? Or talk to somebody, because you might not be able to see it straight anymore because you've been dealing with these feelings for some time. So so you can ask somebody, okay, these are the things that I'm dealing with right now. Is it reasonable that I can't stop thinking about it? It's interrupting my sleep, which is one of the things that you'd notice if you have anxiety. Sometimes I can't focus on anything because the thoughts seem to be spinning around in my head. That's something that happens to people with anxiety. So you can, talk about it. I know a lot of people don't like to do that. That stigma is very strong, but also a lot of people are close to folks and feel a comfort level. So pick someone you trust that isn't going to, suck it up kind of thing, but rather actually look at it with you in a way that's reasonable. And then you can go from there, because typically, if it's clinical anxiety, it's going to be like the smallest things or something that somebody said will you'll be thinking about that for days when it's, whereas that emotion anxiety, um and it's too bad they named them the same, right? But the emotion anxiety is something that is in response to something that is a big deal that's happening right now, right? And so that's one way. But the other way is to go to your doctor and just say, like, I've been concerned because this is happening, and your doctor will be able to suss that out with a few questions.
I really like that, like the clinical anxiety versus the emotional anxiety, because we don't always have a way to talk about or differentiate. So
Mhm.
I really like that comment. I think that's really important for us to take away. Um, and talking about talking to someone, like that's with Do More, that's a big thing, or we want to say talk it out, talk to someone about what's going on. Do you have any suggestions for, like, if you're maybe around that person that you are starting to see signs and you're worrying that maybe that they are experiencing that clinical anxiety, what what are the signs that that person who might be in that support role, that spouse, family member, employer, what have you, could be looking for, and then how do they go about starting that conversation?
Oh, that's a really good question. Because I think we get kind of used to just assuming people are having a bad day or whatever, and don't see it sometimes. So, what if you're around someone regularly who is struggling with anxiety? What you'll see and hear from them are, first of all, they will be having trouble sleeping, probably. Okay, so there might be a disruption in their sleeping or eating habits. So you might be able to see them being very, very tired. Another thing is expressing that they're feeling overwhelmed with an amount of work that normally they would be able to get done um, easily. But now it's like, oh, I can't do another thing. Now I have to think of this now. So that overwhelming feeling is something that is associated with anxiety. Um, it's funny because this is I mean, it isn't necessarily a sign, but if that person, when loud noises happen, like the dryer buzzes or the doorbell rings or the door opens in the office, will jump, will be that person who's extremely jumpy, oh my gosh, and it's just the dryer. That's one of those things that if that's consistently a thing, they're obviously a little bit higher in their level of anxiety than other times. Um, and oftentimes the number one thing is people will say, I'm feeling just overwhelmed with my thoughts lately, right?
So if
So
I'm seeing those things in someone close to me, how best do I go about broaching that subject with them?
one of the ways I like, because stigma is so strong, and it depends on the area too, but my personal experience is sometimes that stigma is even stronger in really demanding places like being in rural areas and stuff. Um, so because that stigma is strong, it's hard to just come up and say, hey, you know what, you're showing signs of anxiety, because you might get a very defensive response. But if you let people know, I find one of my favorite ways of doing that is if you let people know that, I've noticed that you're really jumpy lately, you're not getting a lot of sleep, and things seem to really be overwhelming you. And I heard that those can be signs of like actual anxiety. Like maybe you should see a doctor about that. Sometimes that helps, and it says that you've been paying attention and you've been listening.
Yeah. And I like that, like pointing out, like, I've noticed these things so that it's not just like coming out and saying, like, hey, I think this is going on, like helping them see why are having that conversation. How would you, because like some of those symptoms you're saying, for me, it sounds a lot like the symptoms that you might have if you're experiencing burnout. So how do you like differentiate, or is it best just to like, if you are having that collection of symptoms, to go talk to a doctor and let them figure out what's going on?
Yeah, that's best. Absolutely. So when you look at some of those things, and especially to like anxiety attacks or panic attacks, that's very, very anxiety um, based. But when you're looking at those things, it's always best to go see your doctor, because sometimes it's neither anxiety nor burnout nor PTSD. What it is that you have an infection somewhere in your body, and it's causing enough stress for you to be feeling different and feeling not yourself. So a doctor can rule out those physical symptoms as well.
That's so important. I didn't even think about how, like, I always talk about how the mental health can affect the physical, but I didn't even think about how the physical and something like an infection that we don't know about could be affecting our mental well-being and what we're feeling and experiencing.
Our body's all connected.
Who would be at risk?
Anybody. That's one of those, anxiety is one of the top things that people struggle with when it comes to mental health issues. And so really it could be anybody, and you don't even like, it doesn't always come on that you struggle with anxiety from like the moment you're born. It's like that, usually it's something like you don't realize that that's the thing until either adolescence or some stressor happens and produces that initial thing. So it's not like it, I think anyone is susceptible to that. We all have the brains and the juices that flow around them, and so we all have the capacity to have an imbalance in that sometimes.
And is it like, if you are diagnosed with clinical anxiety, is that something then you manage for, or you can expect to manage for life? Or is that something that, depending on what's going on in your life, working with a therapist, all of these different pieces, that you could get to a point where that has lessened or backed off?
That's a really good question, because that depends on the person. So some folks will be on medication for a while and go to like a counselor of some sort, work on some tools and work through it, and be able to reduce that medication, or go off it altogether. Some folks will not be able to manage after they've started the medication. They won't be able to manage that level of anxiety if they go off it on their own, which is, I mean, it's not because they aren't understanding the tools right. It's just that's where their bodies are at. And I've met both types of folks, and yeah, it's not a sign of weakness or a sign of anything like that. It's a sign that your body just works differently than someone else's does, and that's okay. So yeah, it depends. But if you work closely with your doctor and with a counselor, you'll know when that is, or what sort of anxiety you have.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. And just that it's just your body and how your body's working. like I wear glasses and I think about, I was a teenager when I got glasses and I didn't go in with the expectation that, okay, I'm going to have them for a year and they're going to, sort my eyes out and then I'm not going to need glasses for the rest of my life. Right. And I think it's good that we need to start kind of evolving our thought process around um, just how our brains work too. And sometimes it is a chemical thing. And like finding something that's external that supports you to get you to a healthy place, whether that's, your physical well-being, your eyes, your brain, that's not a negative. If something's working, that's a good thing. And we need to be accepting of it and not just trying to then move away from it or feeling like at some point we're going to be able to graduate from what is needed as support right now.
Mhm. Yeah, no, thanks. That's absolutely the case. Like if you're on medications, it doesn't mean that um I don't know that that means anything negative about you. It means that you're working on it and you're helping things work properly. Like if you were on insulin for diabetes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great comparison. Are there different types of anxiety, like clinical anxiety or anxiety disorders?
Oh, there are many anxiety disorders, and knowing some of them can actually be also signs because a person's these things get worse, right? So things like phobias are actually anxiety disorders. So I know an example. Um, I'm afraid of spiders, right? But normally I can walk past a spider and I can just, say hello and move along and not have to worry about it as long as it's not on me. But if I'm in a heightened stress situation and I have a whole lot of deadlines coming up and I see a spider, I'm probably going to freeze. Right. So it gets worse if you're if that if the stressors that are pushing on you, making you feel anxious, are worse. So it can be a sign if people's phobias get stronger. OCD is an anxiety disorder. It's a very specific kind of anxiety disorder, and there's very specific medications for that. But that extra added worry about whether you turned the toaster off or whether you um, did the locked your door before you left and you have to go back and check. Those things can be signs that the fact that you're thinking about that more often and you have to go check more often might be signs that your anxiety is going a little bit out of your control at that time. Um, Trichomania, so that twisting your hair and then pulling it out. That's an anxiety disorder. Or type of anxiety disorders. So there are a number of ways that those actually manifest in different people, different types of manifestations of anxiety. So yeah, there's a lot of different disorders associated with anxiety that can be helped in similar ways, actually.
I hadn't thought either of those things, like how you just highlighted that your reaction to them can be a sign of where you're at. And the spiders was such a great example. My sister's afraid of spiders, and yeah, I can see how I never would have connected it before, but how your reaction to that stressor, of course, is going to be dependent on what is going on with everything else in your life and where you're at kind of from that mental well-being point of view. Um, what are some methods that people can use if or tools if they're starting to feel like um their their stressors are becoming more heightened or maybe they're starting to feel like a panic attack might be coming on. What are some things that they could do? Like, do breathing exercises help for someone that would be feeling like their anxiety is heightened or they're moving towards a panic attack?
There's a lot of exercises and things that work for that. Mindfulness meditation or mindfulness exercises work really well. They've been studied to work really well for that. Breathing exercises works for some people, not for others. Um, One tool that seems to work quite well is if you sit somewhere quiet, and you close your eyes and you tense up each muscle and then relax. And you do that all the way through your body. And then you take a deep breath. That seems to help a lot of people too. So you bring the tension forward and then release. And so that's one of the exercises. Or there's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is actually pretty quick. That works for a lot of people. So I could quickly show you what that's like. Okay. So what you would do is you would sit down, feet on the floor, in a really comfortable way, and then think of, from where you're sitting and what you're doing right now, think of 5 things that you can see and name them in your head. So, I can see the computer, I can see the camera, I can see the mouse, I can see my stapler, and I can see bags. But then I can think of 4 things after you do the seeing one. You think of 4 things that you can hear, and that actually means being very quiet and listening for sounds. So I might be able to hear, my neighbor in the office is rolling his chair around and it squeaks right now. I can hear some traffic outside. I can hear somebody writing something, and I just heard a stapler. And then 3 things that you can feel. Okay. So, and that's not the feelings inside your body, the emotions or anything like that, but physically feels. This is your senses, right? So you can think of 3 things you can feel. I can feel my jacket under my fingers. I can feel the softness of my chair. And I can feel the fuzziness of the inside of my socks. And then 2 things that you can smell. And that's a little harder sometimes because you might mix all the smells together, but right now I can smell the flowers in the office if I concentrate on it. And I can smell a little bit of that kind of musty spring smell that happens. And then 1 thing that you can taste. So right now I can taste kind of the remnants of my morning coffee, right? And as you're doing that, you have to concentrate very carefully on those things, right? On something external that's, you're focusing on those things and you're trying to name them. So you actually have to, sort out the pieces and focus. And when you do that, I think of it like a snowball rolling down a hill. Okay, so when you have these anxiety thoughts circling in your head, they keep resurfacing and resurfacing, and it gets worse and worse. You add more and more meaning to what did they mean by that? I feel so ridiculous because I said this, and I'm sure they think I'm whatever. And it turns into a bigger and bigger snowball when you block those thoughts by focusing very specifically on things like on very tangible sensory things. It's like squishing that snowball. So it has to start all over again. So then it makes it small again and have to start over. So that's kind of the analogy of that tool. And that seems to work for a lot of people, and it can be done fairly quickly. So if you're driving in traffic and you feel a panic attack coming on, you can pull over to the side of the road somewhere safe and just do that in your car, and you're not going to be causing a disruption or something like that.
That's incredible. I had never heard of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 before. And I can see how even just if you're, I think of my kids, like them being overwhelmed or them going on like a negative self-doubt spiral, or, feeling as an adult, maybe I'm stressed out about the stuff I need to do, but just a way to bring myself back to the present and to ground myself in that moment. Like that seems to be like an incredible tool. I think that anyone could probably fit into their day to day when they're starting to feel a little overwhelmed or stressed out.
Well, it has a little bit of roots of mindfulness in it,
Yeah.
and grounding techniques. And um, so there's quite a few things that contribute to that exercise. And I know a lot of people who that seems to help really well. And especially when I'm talking to high school students and they don't really have a place to do anything and they don't want, and they have to make a presentation at the end of class and they're terrified and they can feel their anxiety doing that thing. And they excuse themselves and go to the bathroom and they can do that there. And so
Mhm.
it's also just easy to fit into a schedule, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important point. How would you, like we've already touched on anxiety attacks, but how would you, from a clinical point of view, describe what an anxiety attack is or a panic attack?
All right. Well, anxiety attacks and panic attacks are, similar creatures, right? And the way that they can be described is like a lot of people firmly believe when they're having that they're actually experiencing a heart attack. So you can feel tightness in your chest. You can feel just like almost like this paralyzing, uh, you know, I don't know what to do with myself right now kind of thing. And oftentimes it's mistaken for a heart attack. And of course, when you start thinking heart attack, that anxiety goes even higher through the roof. So that's going to make it even worse. Um, for some folks, though, it doesn't feel quite like that. It feels like a sudden need to burst into tears or hide or like that. Um, just this feeling of being completely overwhelmed. So that it can be that as well. But usually, from an outsider's perspective, when you see that happen, you can tell that someone is struggling with with something, medically, like it's somebody is like that what they're doing doesn't coincide with the way people respond to general things that are happening in regular world life. So you can tell that something is going terribly wrong for that person. Um, so what's happening is that the anxiety that is producing like extra the anxiety that's producing extra kind of worry juices, if you will. Okay, it's not being reduced at all. So it just accumulates and accumulates until your brain is so overwhelmed with with those things that it can't think of all the stuff anymore. It can't, so it's like almost like a reset for your worry meter, if you will. So I really don't like, going on about like medical terminology because I don't think everybody gets it. And so I'd rather do it the other way.
Yeah, I
so
like that, the worry meter.
so it's like, you have to dump out the worry meter because it's gotten full of some or something like that. You know what I mean? So that's what's happening to you. And so but it feels like, I mean, a lot of people feel at that moment that, oh my gosh, I look ridiculous. People are going to think terrible things about me. Or I think I'm having a heart attack and I'm going to die kind of. So it's like the highest level of worry that a person, if you can imagine that experience.
Is it helpful? Because again, I resort back to my kids, but I think of kind of that like that fear response where we have either like flight, fight, or freeze. And
Mhm.
after we work through that, Like what I'll do with my kids is like move your body around. Like you gotta kind of finish that cycle and release that energy. Does that help afterwards at all, or is it different?
Oh, that helps afterwards also, because it's like very, I mean, it's very, there's a lot. It's like you have extra,
Hmm.
right? You have extra of something. So it does help to release that. It also helps with it very much helps with much like that 5 4 3 2 1 exercise or the clench and release exercise. Your physical body can very much help your mental wellness, just being able to, move around and feel yourself moving.
Hmm. What kind of support, and you can be provincially specific if that helps, but what kind of support is out there? We've talked about, going through your doctor medication, but are there other types of support that exist for people experiencing clinical anxiety, or also for the people that are supporting, like support for the supporter? Are there anything specific, or is it more kind of just the traditional recommendations?
Well, there are some, traditional recommendations, of course, like we always recommend that that you do both like medication and counseling, because the medication helps you clear your mind enough to be able to be receptive to that counseling, and that counseling can help you learn new tools and learn new skills, and reduce those thoughts in other ways. So that's always the recommendation. But I would encourage people to explore things like online counseling that does CBT, so you can change the way you think. That stuff works for anxiety some. You can explore things, a lot of educational things, especially for those people who are supporting people with anxiety. Exploring educational things. So I think of our own CMHA. We have the Hope Learning Center, and we have courses that are specifically on um, different mental health issues. Like we'll have a specific course on depression, we have a specific course on anxiety and on bipolar. So engaging in those courses, oftentimes it's both education that's provided, and as well as like a question and answer kind of discussion period, which ends up being support group like, because you end up hearing that other people are dealing with the same thing that you or your person that you care for are going through. And so it feels more like well, it anchors you to like the idea that, okay, this is all that this is. It's okay, right? And other people are dealing with it too, and that feels good. So I know that while I've spoken of our Hope Learning Center, I know that there's recovery colleges all throughout this nation. So and a lot of stuff online that you can register. I know our recovery college will take registrations from across Canada, as well as most CMHA recovery colleges. So so that's something to look at, and really educating yourself. So especially like as a support person, there's not many other things other than being able to remind your person, okay, which do you want to do the 5 4 3 2 1 now? Or like, because I see you're kind of getting to that point, and maybe we could do that together. And being able to ask them for the first one because they're maybe um, in that state of mind where they're starting to do that panicky thing. So, okay, I'm just going to remind you. Can you tell me 5 things that you see? That sort of thing. So they're helping in that way, but being able to educate yourself on different types of tools and different ways of doing things and what might work for your person is important, I think.
Yeah, that's all great. Thank you so much for that. I think in the process too, it helps each individual, like we're all at different stages in our journeys and what we know about mental wellness and mental health. And I think, we've already touched on it with the 5 4 3 2 1, but even tools that you might be learning to support the person that is you can to support and your loved one, there's probably going to be takeaways for you that you can incorporate into your day to day with just what's going on or what might come up through life. Like life can throw all sorts of stuff at you, right? So I think that, yeah, the more we know, the better we can take care of ourselves and take care of those around us. Is there
Okay.
anything we haven't touched on that you feel is really important to highlight?
Well, I think I just, if you don't mind me repeating myself a little
Yeah,
bit,
no, for sure.
um, I think that it's important, and I really like, I want to look at anxiety for a moment and just remind people that it can be a very dangerous thing to just let go. So please, if you are a person who's struggling or maybe struggling with anxiety and think, "Oh, maybe that's me," or you think, wow, that sounds a lot like my mom, you know, or whatever. The thing to do would be to get a doctor to just take a look and see and let you know if that's something that's actually being struggled with, so that you can get on your way to treating that, and it doesn't get to the point that it gets to for quite a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you for reiterating that. Thank you for everyone who's taken the time to watch this and to learn more about anxiety and how to support or how to get help. If you're looking for more information, you can visit our website, which is domore.ag, or check out the CMHA websites as well. Thank you very much. Take care.